Hello again. Welcome to our sixth session. So, this is going to be our last session in this format. Our next session is going to be open for the discussion. But for now, let me introduce you to our next speaker, Krupa Patil. She's a commercial artist by profession and an avid wildlife lover at heart. She takes special interest in children publishing and creating content and design for nature education and awareness. And most importantly, she is one of the trustee of Greenworks Trust. So, without any further delay, I would like to hand over this session to Krupa Patil.
Thank you very much, Gargi. Hi, friends. This is the sixth session, as she said. And till now, you've attended all these sessions on various topics. You have seen these topics, which were all the abiotic components of our environment in the beginning. And then we slowly moved on to the biotic components, out of which the last one that you heard was about forests. Now, this session is going to be continuing that thread of biotic components. The next session, which is this session, is going to be on our biodiversity. Okay, let us just first start understanding the term. What is biodiversity? It's very simple, bio and diversity. Okay, so bio means life. Okay, means all the living things, and diversity means the variety that is there in it. Okay, the variedness in it. So whether it is flora, fauna, both are included in life when I say bio. Okay, and the variety, the wide variety that is there is together called biodiversity. Now let us see how it all began. Okay, if you remember this diagram which Sagar had shown in one of his earlier presentations, the very important milestone, you remember this one? Atmospheric oxygen came into existence. Okay, and that proved to be a very, very important milestone even when it comes to biodiversity, because it is after this particular stage that you look at this, biodiversity really flourished and many different types of species came into existence. The evolution took place, and right from lesser fauna to, you can see here, to higher animals, reptiles, birds, mammals, and right till us Homo sapiens. Okay, we all evolved after this very important stage, which is existence of atmospheric oxygen. Okay, this gentleman, Carl Linnaeus, okay, he was a researcher, and he's known to be the father of binomial nomenclature. Okay, he 250 years ago, he made an estimation that there would be 87 lakh species on Earth, right? And today, out of which, out of the estimation that he had made, there are 12 lakh species on land that are known to mankind. Okay, and there are another 2 lakh species that are in water, which we know of. Okay, but he had made an estimation of 87 lakh species to be in existence, right? Now, all these species, these lakhs and lakhs of species that are there, known or unknown to us, okay, they keep interacting. They are interdependent. They are all interlinked and interdependent, and they keep interacting. And the best example, or the most popular example of their interdependence, or their interaction, is the food chain. We all know about it, right? The food chain and the food pyramid. Now, food chain, we all know there are producers, the plants basically. They get consumed by primary consumers, and then they are eaten by secondary consumers, and then tertiary, and this whole chain and this cycle continues, right? And similarly, we know what a food pyramid is. It is also a food chain, okay, but it also has a indication of the population. So if you see here that the population of producers is always a lot, okay, then the primary consumers who depend on it, they are relatively lesser in population, and then lesser. So as we go higher up in the pyramid, okay, and the top of the apex predator, this is called the apex of the pyramid. So the top of the pyramid, the population is lesser. So as we go higher up in the pyramid, the population becomes lesser and lesser. And that is probably, friends, that is the reason that the pyramid is stable, that there are a lot of producers. The base has to be broad, and as you move up, it can go tapering, and that actually gives the stability to the food pyramid. So moving on, what is the importance of biodiversity? Of course, we all know that it is important to maintain the ecological balance, We have seen about the medicinal value of biodiversity, right? We've also seen a very important aspect which Deepali covered in a session of wildlife tourism, that how wildlife tourism is very, very important. Okay. Another very interesting and important thing about biodiversity is that they are bioindicators. Now, what does that mean? In this particular picture, what we see here, they are lichens. Now, lichens are supposed to be an indication of a pollution-free environment, of a pollution-free place, because lichens grow only in places where there is no pollution. Okay, so if if lichens are growing in a certain place, it shows that that particular area is pollution free. Okay, and similarly I would go ahead and say that if lichens are not seen anymore, then it is an alarming, it is an indication, and that is why they're called bioindicators, that something is wrong, the pollution levels are going higher, right? So there are various in biodiversity, there are many things that keep giving us indications or signals, and that is why they are very important, because they are bioindicators for us. Now, what are the threats to biodiversity? Of course, there are natural threats, like there are floods and forest fires, there's erosion, so many natural causes, that become threat to biodiversity. But there are also anthropogenic threats, which are human induced, because of humans, okay, because of us. So what are those? They are poaching, pollution, deforestation, right? And because of all these threats, what happens? Loss of biodiversity. We are continuously losing biodiversity. Okay, but anybody would say, okay, biodiversity is lost, so what, right? So what? Because it's a very rational or a very obvious question. So what? And we just saw that there are lakhs and lakhs of species. Okay, so what is the big difference if a few get threatened or few are going extinct? The lakhs and lakhs of species. So is it really affecting me? Because till we don't see that effect, we generally feel, okay, biodiversity is going, but it's not really affecting me. It's not really affecting my daily routine, right? And I can give you examples. Just let us take the example of the cheetah. We all know that India had cheetah, right? India lost its last cheetah in 1952. Correct. Mumbai, a place like Mumbai, a city, metropolitan city like Mumbai, lost its last tiger in the 1930s. I'll give you two more examples. The pink-headed duck. This particular species it was last sighted in 1949. After that, it has not been sighted. Okay, till now. It is almost, considered to be extinct. Great Indian Bustard, another classic example. The population is dwindling. It's almost getting wiped out. In Maharashtra, it has lost almost its entire population. There are very few left that we know in northwestern parts of India now, right? But with all these, did our life, your and my life, get affected in any way? Right? What difference did it make to me as such? Correct? That it's a very obvious question that will come to our mind. Now there is no cheetah in India, so what difference did it make to me? Okay, but have we ever thought? And I'm going to bring your attention to a few points. Okay, we just saw very recently, we have seen two big cyclones in India, cyclone Amphan and cyclone Nisarga, and we have seen what kind of havoc they have created. Right now, why do these cyclones happen so frequently these days? Of course, due to global warming, of course, due to climate change, but it can also be due to the loss of biodiversity. Okay, and this connection between the loss of biodiversity and increased cyclones, okay, it is still not proven, but it can't be denied, because there's still work going on it, and it cannot be denied. And when I say biodiversity loss, I mean flora, fauna, both. Okay, another very important aspect, increase in disease outbreaks. Okay, a lot of study again is happening about this topic, and researchers are saying that biodiversity loss is leading to an increase in disease outbreaks. And friends, what is a better time to realize this, or think about this, that we're right in the middle of a pandemic. We have just seen what a pandemic can actually do to us, to people, to their families, to the society, to the world, okay, to the world economy. We've just witnessed all of that. And disease outbreaks is going to be increasing if we continue losing biodiversity at this rate. And this is who's saying this? There are researchers who are talking about this and doing more and more study about it. Okay, but still what is happening is that we are unable to assess the impact of biodiversity loss. We always feel ki, biodiversity it's going, but like I said, is it having an impact on me, on my daily life? No. But why? It is because we are unable to assess the impact of the loss. And why is it so? Because see, sometimes the effect of the loss is not immediate. Okay, sometimes it takes time for us to realize that the problem we are facing is actually due to biodiversity loss. Okay, hear me out carefully. Okay, I'm putting throwing light on very important and the finer nuances of it, that the effect is sometimes not immediate. Okay, sometimes it takes time for us to realize that the problem we are facing is due to biodiversity loss. And it is all because it needs a lot of research. Okay, like I said, that researchers, scientists, they are still working on this. It is not proven. They're showing that connection, but it is still not proven because it needs a lot of research, which we are currently lacking. Okay, there is research happening, but not in the magnitude that it is needed to be. So we are lacking in this kind of research, and that is why we are unable to prove that biodiversity is so important, or what is the impact of losing biodiversity. But the reality is that even as we talk here, as we are doing this session here, we are rapidly losing our biodiversity. Right? It is happening right under our noses, and we are still unaware of it. Okay, we are still unaware of how much we are losing, at what rate we are losing, and how it is impacting us. Right? Still not convinced that biodiversity is very important? Okay, now I'm going to give you some examples. Let us see some examples which these examples will actually show the connection of biodiversity and us directly. Okay, it will tell us how biodiversity is such an integral part of our existence and how it directly affects us. Okay, let's take a look at that. Bees, we all know that they are best pollinators, correct? 1/3 of the food that we eat, it is pollination dependent. Okay, and 70 different types of crops get pollinated by bees. Okay, which are these crops? And you'll be just look at these crops that I'm talking about. It is cabbage, cauliflower, potato, carrot, capsicum, chilies, lemon, cucumber. There's so many of them. I told you, just 70 different types of crops, watermelon, and they're all in from our everyday food plate. Okay, we consume this every day. So now we know that bees are directly helping us in our food availability. They are ensuring our food availability, because these are things that it's directly impacting us, right? We have these things. I mean, cabbage and watermelons and cauliflowers, we have it every day. Chilies, lemons, it's a part of our everyday diet. Correct? Moving on, birds. Birds are very, very helpful as in seed dispersal, because see, pollination is a very important step. Okay, but pollination alone is not important. Okay, the next step that is equally important after pollination is seed dispersal, and that is done by birds, the frugivorous birds, of course. Okay, and they help in forest regeneration. We have just seen how important forests are. Okay, so to keep these forests going and to help in regeneration of these forests, seed dispersal is important, which these birds do. Okay, now these are frugivorous birds. Now what about the insectivorous birds? Let's take a look. The insectivorous birds, they work as a pest controllers for us. Okay, they actually consume the pests that damage our crops, are consumed by these birds. They eat these pests, and thus they keep the population there, the pest population, in control. Okay, in this picture we can see this bird is called the Indian courser, and it's eating a locust. Okay, and if you remember, we just had a swarm attack, a locust attack that happened in 5 states. It was quite a massive attack. The cloud of locusts, they traveled across 5 different states in India, and they caused massive losses to our crops, to our farmers. Okay, and it was a very big damage. You might have seen it in news and read about it. um, we can just imagine that the kind of loss that a small insect like this, a small pest like this can cause. But just imagine if we had enough birds, this kind of damage could have been lesser, right? Because these insectivorous birds, they keep the pest population under control, and the damages are in such cases can be controlled, could have been controlled in this case also, right? Another uh, part of the biodiversity I would like to tell you, who does all these three important tasks. Okay, it does pollination also, seed dispersal also, and pest control also. And who's that? It works in the night time largely. I'm talking about the bat. Okay, bats, there are some species who are excellent pollinators. Okay, some are very good seed dispersal agents, and some bats, some species, they feed on insects, and they does do free pest control for us. Okay, they consume insects, they consume pests. Okay, and pests like mosquitoes. And we don't need anybody to tell us how harmful mosquitoes can be to humans. We all know about dengue, malaria, right? So they keep this pest population under control. And how many pests, how many small insects can they eat? Let me tell you, one bat can eat about 500 to 3000 insects per night. Okay, small insects like mosquito sized insects, they can actually consume up to 3000 insects in one night. Now just imagine how thankful we should be to bats, correct? Now let us zoom into some tinier objects, tinier creatures rather. Ants and earthworms. Okay, they've, as we know that they're all found, they're seen in the soil, and they keep moving in the soil. Correct. So how do they help us now? Their movement, their continuous movement in the soil, by that they upturn the soil, which helps in maintaining the soil quality. Okay, we again know how important soil is to us, and maintaining the soil quality is important. Okay, and ants, let me tell you, ants, they can upturn 34 tons of soil per hectare per year. And earthworms, they upturn 10 to 500 tons of soil per hectare per year. Okay, that much upturn, that much churning up of soil happens just because of the movement of these ants and earthworms. Now, another important thing that the earthworms, they do for us is that they make small openings on the surface of the ground. Okay, when they go inside and outside and in through their movement in the soil, they create openings on the surface of the ground, and those openings, okay, lead to small tunnels like these. Okay, there's a mesh or a network of small tunnels inside the soil. Okay, an earthworm can make 220 openings in an area of just 1 square meter. Okay, and these openings are very important from the point of view of seepage of rainwater. Okay, these openings actually allow, or they facilitate more rainwater to seep into the ground, and which helps in recharging of the groundwater. Again, we have seen how important groundwater is, okay, to meet our own water needs, right? So earthworms do that job for us to facilitate more and more seepage of rainwater. Another example is of the microscopic bacteria. Okay, they help us by giving us better yield and protection to the crops. Now, how? Again, okay, let me tell you. Okay, plants, they need nitrogen, they need potassium and phosphates for their growth. Okay, which is all available in soil, but it is not easily available to the roots. Now let us see, look at these. This is the root structure. Okay, all these tips, this is a zoomed in view of the root tip. Okay, now these microscopic bacteria, they surround the root tips. Okay, and they help the plant to absorb these nutrients. Okay, another benefit is that these bacteria, they form a kind of a shield around the roots, and they protect that plant from some other harmful bacteria which can damage the plant or the crop. Okay, so bacteria, they help in better yield and also in protection. So both ways, twofold benefit. Another microscopic organism is the fungi. They also help us to get better yield from the crop. Now why? Again, let us take a look at the root system here. We can see the roots. right? Now these roots, they are finer. Again, this is a root tip. Okay, this is a zoomed in version of a root tip. Now roots, they don't actually reach the very tiny spaces between soil particles. Okay, and this is where the soil, the water and minerals are there. So all these tiny crevices, okay, there is water available, there are minerals available which are required for the nourishment of the plant. Okay, so these microscopic fungi that can be present, that they are present in these tiny places, in spaces, they actually help reaching these minerals to the roots. Okay, so they help provide nutrition to the roots. And not just here, okay my friends, not just in these tiny places. Just look at this diagram on the left. Okay, the root network, I would say, is only till here, correct? This space that is there, there are these oblique lines, okay, slanting lines. This space, even in this space in the soil, there is water, there are minerals, okay, but the roots have not even reached there. But the microscopic fungi that are there, everywhere in the soil, they help reach the minerals even from here to the roots. So even from where the roots cannot reach, the fungi actually help the nutrients reach the plant, the roots. Okay, and thus of course that this kind of nourishment helps the better yield of crop. Okay, again, crop I'm talking about, which are all important crops, which we eat, which we consume every day, staples like wheat, bajra. Okay, they are an important part of our daily diet, right? And these bacteria or fungi, they help in better yield of these crops. Another very important, if you remember this slide again, right? Oxygen that we get, 70% of oxygen that we get from the oceans, correct? What gives us that oxygen? What is there in the oceans that generates this oxygen? It is the phytoplanktons. Okay, these microscopic plants that are really tiny plants that are there in the oceans. Now these ones, they give us oxygen, okay, but who help the phytoplanktons grow? How do these phytoplanktons flourish? So they flourish because of whales. Okay, and how? So these phytoplanktons, they are on the surface, they're near the surface of the oceans. Okay, whales, okay, whales are going around, and they, whales consume, when the whales eat, okay, whales eat, and they have to poop. Of course, what goes in, they has to come out. So when they poop, they cannot poop under the, whales go deep, as in they dive deep down to eat, but they have to come up, okay, near the surface to actually poop. And what they give out, okay, their waste is actually a very good, it acts as a fertilizer for these phytoplanktons. So when the whales come up to the surface to poop, that poop serves as a fertilizer to the phytoplanktons, and that is why they, actually thrive and they flourish. And if there are a lot of phytoplanktons, of course there's going to be a lot of oxygen that is given back to us, right? So just imagine the things in nature, that it is really microscopic tiny plants, and who helps them? The biggest of all animals is the whale, and that is the kind of interaction that they have with each other. Another part of the biodiversity, let us look at these mangroves. Okay, mangroves help us in protection from tides and tsunamis. Okay, they can actually reduce the impact of tsunamis, but tsunamis don't happen every day, right? Yeah, but tides, okay, these mangroves are all, they're coastal forests. Okay, so tides that are there, they happen every single day. The waves come and go and come and go, and it is a continuous process, right? Now just look at the structure of these roots. Okay, mangroves have a very peculiar root structure, and because of this structure, there are a lot of in between spaces. If you see here, a lot of in between spaces, a mesh, like a network, thick network is formed here. And because of this thick network, the impact of the waves, okay, the waves that come and hit the land, that impact is reduced. Okay, it works as a, almost like a speed breaker for the continuous waves. And when the waves come, they go back, they can actually take a lot of good soil back, okay, and cause erosion. They can cause soil erosion, but mangroves are the ones who actually keep the soil intact on the land, and they reduce the impact of the waves. Okay, I'm going to show you a quick video on this. Okay, this is a video. It is actually a tabletop model, okay, just to demonstrate the impact, the importance of mangroves, or the impact of mangroves. Okay, we can see here, I'm going to play this video and explain the video to you. So this is it's like a fish tank, like a huge fish tank that is created, a tabletop model. From one side of the tank, there are waves created artificially. Waves are generated artificially. Let us look at the video now. The waves are generated. Yes, I'm going to play the video again. And if you see when the waves get generated, we can see the waves coming. When they hit this patch of mangroves in the middle, we can see the impact of waves going down and down and down. And on the other side, the water becomes very calm till it hits this, land. We can call this land. Till the time it comes and hits the land, the water impact, this belt of mangroves actually has, worked as a speed breaker. So now let's see the video again. Yeah, the impact is reduced here. And by the time it comes here, it is still and calm. Correct? So this is the importance of these mangroves, and mangroves can. Let's take a look at this visual, a very common visual for Mumbaikars or many coastal cities that we have. Local trains is called the lifeline of Mumbai. Okay, and we can see a local train passing here. This are mangroves. Okay, now just imagine there are the constant waves and tides that are coming from here. Okay, just imagine if this belt of mangroves was not there. Okay, the constant move, the coming and going of the waves can actually cause soil erosion. It can actually take this land away, and the tracks can be damaged. So it can immediately impact the land here. Okay, the local train that we call the lifeline of Mumbai is under threat if the mangroves are not in place. Okay, so just imagine that this belt of mangroves, this green belt, is very, very important, and that is why no wonder that these mangroves are called coastal warriors or safeguards. Okay, to all the coastal cities. Yeah, so now do we know? Yes, I've given you enough examples to show how biodiversity, again, flora, fauna, both, I've given you examples that it directly helps us. Directly helps us. It has connections to our everyday life. Correct? But again, we are losing this biodiversity very, very rapidly. Yeah, it's very unfortunate, but that is the reality. And that is why it is time for us to wake up and take stock. Okay, so now let us take stock of what is actually happening to our biodiversity. Bees are dying. Just look at all these reports. I'm going to be sharing with you some news reports, some studies by researchers that tell us what is actually happening to our biodiversity, what is the reality of the status of our biodiversity now. So the first one comes here: bees are dying. Okay, air pollution threatens honeybees. Just look at all these reports, and I've just shared with you how important bees are to our daily life, to what we eat every single day. Correct? Moving on, whales are dying. Again, whales are very important. For what? Because whales are, they're the ones who are giving nourishment to the phytoplanktons. And we all know that phytoplanktons are very important to us for the oxygen that they provide. Correct? Just look at this plastic pollution. You've seen this earlier in the saline water presentation, that plastic pollution is increasing and it's massive. Okay, and phytoplanktons are dying because of that. Fish are dying just because of the pollution. Because of polluted water, fish are dying. Next one, earthworms are dying. Correct? Just look at this groundwater depletion. Earthworms, what do they do for us? They create, remember I told you, they create those small openings and the tunnels which help in water seepage. Now just imagine, just look at this picture here, which gives, it's a very in an urban landscape, in an urban place. This is a society, housing society, and everything is tiled here. Everything is tiled. There's no open space. Now because of this, obviously, if there's no soil, there is no there are no earthworms, there's no opening of on the soil surface, there's going to be no water seepage, and it will have a direct impact on the level of the water table. And we are facing this problem everywhere. Okay, yeah, not just in India, throughout the globe. This is a global problem that the water table is depleting. Mangroves are dying. Correct. Just look at this everywhere. The belt of mangroves that I told you, it's a very important belt to have in between the coasts and the coastal cities. That is depleting. It's going down and down and down, and mangroves are dying. Okay, so that's also deforestation. Birds are dying. Yeah, we all know that there's a sharp decline, as we can even see here on the screen. Okay, in the bird population, species are getting threatened. The bird population is going down, and again we have seen the various importance of birds as elements of biodiversity, what all they do for us. Okay, yeah, at this moment I would like to share a very important a case study here. This comes from China. Okay, and this case study is just the right example to prove this point. Okay, what happened is that there was a time in China, okay, where sparrows were declared as pests. Okay, what happened is that we all know the population of China is ever growing, and what they realized was that these sparrows used to take a lot of grain. Okay, they used to consume a lot of grain, and this grain was important to feed the ever growing population of China. So they thought that sparrows are pests because they eat too much of our grain, and which can be actually used for our own population. So they actually declared sparrows as pests, and they put them in the line of mosquitoes and flies and rats. Okay, so these four things were all declared as pests, and they were officially allowed to kill sparrows. Okay, now because of this thing, the entire population of sparrows got wiped off from China. Okay, and what happened after that was quite an eye opener for them. Okay, because what happened after that, there was a pest attack. Okay, and in that pest attack, there was a massive loss to the crops and the grains. Okay, and that is when they realized that these sparrows, which they had killed by now, all of them, okay, these sparrows, they did not only consume grains, they also used to eat these pests. Okay, these insects. So that is when they actually realized the importance of sparrows, and then to the extent that they have reintroduced the species in China. But just imagine, friends, that just think about this example a bit, that man feels that, okay, now it is a pest, it takes too much of my grain, so it is a pest, so now we can kill it. So at one stage, just kill it. Yeah, and then suddenly when you realize the importance, then you have to put it back, and you reintroduce the species. But it is so selfish, that you suddenly give permission to kill everything, and then you realize the importance when it is already too late, right? So this is a classic example of how much ego we have. Okay, we all feel that humans, especially humans, feel that I just showed you the food chain and the food pyramid. We feel that we're on the top of everything, we're on the top of all, that we are there as some god, and then there is all the other biodiversity, there are plants and these animals and everything, but we are all on the top of them. So we can with our we can kill them whenever we want, we can have them whenever we want. It's like that. It's so selfish. It's such an ego thought. Whereas what we need to realize, and in this session we've just seen examples how important they are to us, how biodiversity is important to us, or rather I would say that we are a part of biodiversity. Okay, we are an integral part of biodiversity. Yeah, so we have to definitely start moving away from that ego and moving towards eco. Yeah, it is a very important switch or a transition that we have to make, because we are not on top of them, we are all a part of them. And the earlier we realize that we are a part, and we are all equal. Okay, if we have that mutual respect, it's going to be good for us. Just look at this slide. Okay, just take a minute to understand this. What is this guy doing? He has just put pushed on pile of books or slabs or whatever it is, but he is not realizing that this all is going to come back and fall on his head. Correct? Again, the same thought that whatever we are doing is going to come back to us. The loss of biodiversity is not only going to impact biodiversity, it's not just about losing a few species here and there, but it is going to come back as a boomerang to us, right? And this is what we have to understand. I would like to end this session with a thought again, like we have ended every session with a very strong question or with a thought. I would like to read out this for you. It comes from, it's a slide by Green Humor. Still can't connect the dots between climate change, erratic cyclones, floods in one part of the world, droughts and bushfires in another part of the world, and a collapse in the order of life. Friends, a very important question. It's time that we think about it. Thank you everyone for listening to this session. Thank you. Over to you, Gargi.
Yeah, thank you, Krupa. You have made it really easier for us to understand how exactly everything is interconnected and how these connections can go far than we imagine. So, thank you really for this. Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier, that seventh session is going to be open for the discussion. In next session, we'll summarize what we have learned so far and what we can do once this course is over. So I request you all to choose a quiet place to sit as we'll be interacting. Also, it would be really great if we all could see each other's faces while interacting. So if you have a decent internet connection, please turn your cameras on in the last session. But so far, yeah, uh, so far this is for all now. Okay, be there for the last session, be there for the final session. We'll see you at 7 o'clock, and your test is on the way. And thank you again for joining.